For decades, the UK worked in a very particular way. Everything pointed towards one place, London. If you were building a career, you went there. If you were chasing opportunity, you went there. If you wanted to be where things were happening, you went there. That wasn't just a trend. It wasn't just preference. It was a system, a structure that shaped how the country functioned. Jobs concentrated in one place. Investment concentrated in one place. Talent concentrated in one place. People moving in one direction. And for a long time, that system held. It made sense, it was efficient, it was predictable, because London offered something unmatched: scale, access, global reach, a level of intensity and concentration that created momentum, the kind of momentum that fed itself. More companies meant more jobs meant more people meant more demand, and more demand meant even more growth. It was a cycle, and London sat at the center of it. But now, that structure is starting to shift. Not dramatically, not in a way that replaces London, not in a way that removes its importance, but in a way that redistributes its influence. Because the UK is becoming less London-centric, and that doesn't mean London is declining. It doesn't mean it's losing relevance. It means the system around it is changing. Because for something to be centralized, everything has to depend on it. Everything has to point towards it. Everything has to flow through it, and right now, that dependency is weakening, gradually, quietly, but consistently, and once that process starts, it changes everything. So, a new distribution is emerging, the old pattern is shifting, and, well, it's not just about London anymore. It starts with something simple: opportunity. Because for a long time, London had a near monopoly on it, the highest concentration of jobs, the most competitive industries, the strongest networks, the fastest pace of growth. If you wanted to maximize your chances, you positioned yourself there, because that's where the density was, and density creates advantage. But now, that concentration is spreading. Other cities are growing, not replacing London, but reducing the gap. Manchester, Birmingham, Leeds, cities that were once seen as secondary, are now developing their own identities, their own industries, their own ecosystems. You see it in investment, you see it in infrastructure, you see it in the kinds of companies choosing to base themselves there. Technology firms, creative industries, financial services expanding beyond a single location, not abandoning London, but no longer relying on it exclusively. And that matters, because once opportunity spreads, movement follows. People no longer have to choose one place. They're not forced into a single path. They have options, real ones. And that changes behavior, because once you have options, you start comparing. You start asking questions that didn't need to be asked before. Where can I grow? Where can I afford to live? Where can I build something long term? And those questions don't all point to the same answer anymore. When it comes to making decisions about your future, investment and choice really go hand in hand. You know, every option you consider, whether it's education, a home, or even starting a business, comes with its own set of opportunities and trade-offs. It's important to weigh the potential benefits against the risks, and think about how each choice might shape your life down the road. Remember, investing isn't just about money, it's also about your time, your energy, and your priorities. So take a moment to reflect on what matters most to you, because honestly, the choices you make today can set the foundation for your tomorrow. Then there's cost, because, centralization works best when access is affordable, when people can move towards opportunity without, sacrificing everything else. But London has become expensive, not just slightly, not just noticeably, but significantly, in a way that really affects daily life, in a way that shapes decisions. Housing alone changes everything. Rent takes a large portion of income. Buying property, that feels out of reach for many, and that creates limits. Because when access becomes too costly, people start looking for alternatives, not because they want to leave, but because, honestly, they have to consider it. And those alternatives are now more viable than they used to be. Cities that offer lower cost, while still offering opportunity. Places where income stretches further. where space is more available, where long-term planning actually feels possible again, and that, well, accelerates the shift. Because once people start leaving for practical reasons, others notice. And once others notice, they consider it too. Then there's flexibility, because for decades, location was tied to work. If your job was in London, you had to be there. That was the rule. Simple, clear, unavoidable. But now, that link isn't as strong. Remote work, hybrid roles, flexible arrangements. They've really changed what's possible. You don't always need to be physically present. You don't always need to commute every single day. You don't always need to structure your life around a single location. And that reduces dependency on a single place. Because once location becomes flexible, centralization becomes less necessary. It doesn't disappear, but it definitely weakens. It becomes one option among several, not the only path forward. Then there's infrastructure. Because connectivity has improved. Transport links, rail networks, motorways connecting regions more efficiently, the ability to travel between cities more easily, and just as important, digital infrastructure, high-speed internet, remote communication tools, the ability to collaborate without being in the same room. And that changes how work happens, how businesses operate, how people stay connected, because you can now live in one place and work with people somewhere else. You can build a career across locations without relocating entirely, and that creates a network instead of a single center. A system where multiple places are connected, rather than one place dominating everything. Then there's something less obvious: perception. Because how people see the UK is changing. It's no longer just London and everywhere else. It's multiple cities, multiple regions, each with its own identity, each offering something different. Some offer affordability, some offer lifestyle, some offer emerging industries, some offer a balance that didn't exist before. And once that perception shifts, behavior follows. Because people don't just go where they have to, they go where they want to, where they feel they can build a life, not just a career. And increasingly, those places aren't all in one city. They're spread across the country. And that changes movement patterns. Because instead of one dominant flow, you get multiple smaller ones. People moving in different directions, for different reasons, at different stages of life. Some moving to cities that feel more manageable. Some moving to towns that offer space and stability. Some staying where they are, because they no longer need to move. And that creates variation. Because systems based on one direction are predictable, but systems based on many directions are more complex, more dynamic, more difficult to define, but also more adaptable, more responsive to change, more aligned with individual needs. But this doesn't mean London loses its role. It remains powerful, influential, globally connected, a center for finance, a hub for culture, a gateway to international markets. That doesn't disappear. But its role becomes different, less dominant, more part of a wider system, one node in a larger network, still central, but not singular. And that's the key idea. The UK isn't moving away from London. It's moving beyond it, expanding, distributing, becoming less dependent on a single center. And that has long-term effects, because when growth spreads, everything changes. Housing markets shift, demand moves across regions. Prices adjust in different ways, cities develop differently, infrastructure evolves to support new patterns, local economies strengthen, opportunities become more accessible. Not perfectly, not equally, but more widely than before, and people have more control over where they live, because they're no longer tied to one place. They're choosing based on fit, based on balance, based on what works for them, and that creates something new. A more balanced system. Not perfectly balanced, but more distributed, more flexible, more resilient. And that matters, because systems that rely too heavily on one center are fragile. If that center struggles, everything around it feels the impact. But systems that distribute growth are stronger, more adaptable, less dependent on a single point, more capable of absorbing change, more capable of evolving. And that's the direction the UK is moving in. Not all at once. Not evenly. Not without challenges. But clearly, because what's really happening here isn't just a shift in cities, it's a shift in structure, in how the country organizes itself, how opportunity is distributed, how people move, how growth happens, how decisions are made. And once that structure changes, everything built on top of it changes too. Business decisions, investment patterns, career paths, lifestyle choices, long-term planning, All of it begins to adjust, not suddenly, but gradually, choice by choice, decision by decision, until the system no longer behaves the way it used to. And that's where we are now, in the middle of that transition, where the old model still exists, but the new one is forming, and both are operating at the same time, which is why it feels subtle, because nothing has disappeared, but something new is clearly emerging, and over time, that new structure will define how the UK functions, because the UK of the future won't revolve around a single center in the same way. It will be shaped by multiple, connected, interdependent, each playing a role, each contributing to the whole. And London, still central, still powerful, still important, but no longer the only answer. And that might be the biggest shift of all, because once a system moves from one center to many, it doesn't go back. It continues to evolve, to adapt, to spread. And that means the decisions people make today about where to live, where to work, where to build their lives, are shaping something much bigger. A different kind of UK. One that isn't defined by a single place, but by a network of them. And that shift, quiet as it is already underway.